Over the last about 4 years, I've been shooting videos and learning the language of film, and more specifically, cinematography, shooting music videos and short films. And during this time, I never really focused on a specific aspect of filmmaking, but when I realized I eventually wanted to make features, I knew I had to practice and learn more about cinematography because more than likely, I'm going to have to shoot the film myself. So I've been studying and making these practice videos on my channel for that reason. I'm not the most technically knowledgeable person on YouTube, but I know what I like and what works for my eye, and some of you like it as well. So here goes my best attempt at explaining my process. To me, dark images seem to speak more to me than the basic traditional 3 lighting setup we all learn when we're first starting out. This may come from my love for horror movies, which are 99% of the time shot extremely dark for obvious reasons. Movies like The Conjuring, Saint Maud, Hereditary. Bradford Young is also a cinematographer whose work I'm very inspired by, as he shoots very underexposed on a majority of his films. These darker images to me seem the most of what people would consider to be cinematic. Not saying brighter images aren't cinematic, but things in the lower toe of an image just speak to me and make sense for the sort of stories that I want to tell. Obviously, the lighting gear we use is important. My particular lighting kit isn't anything special, but I make it work for what I do. And to be honest, for lower key lighting, you don't need so much power. The lights I have include one Godox SL60W, 2 Quasar 4 feet science tubes, and a small aperture-like LED panel and some Govee light bulbs. While my lighting kit is constantly growing, the lights that I do have aren't the most powerful, but again, you don't need much for low-key lighting, especially on a very budgetary, independent level. Now again, not the most technical person, but here are my false colors. As you can see in camera, I have a bit of blue in there. I'm okay with that as long as what's dark isn't integral to the story. Some things I don't care to see, but what I'm learning is it's good to have a little information in the shadows so that they can be a bit cleaner and so that you can have some wiggle room when pulling the grade down in post. I usually like to get some green or pink highlights somewhere on the subject, whether that be an edge or a more pronounced key. That helps when keeping your subject exposed well when you pull things down later. I sometimes struggle with that, and my subject sometimes doesn't have that punch that I'm currently looking for. If that's the case, I suggest moving your lights closer or increasing the output. Whether interiors or exteriors, I try to keep my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera within each bracket of the dual ISOs, either from 400 to 1000 or 1250 to 3200. The grain is a little higher with darker interior images using 400 to 1000, as 1250 is recommended for lower light, but I find it a bit harder to control my practicals if my dimmer doesn't dim them low enough, so I tend to stick to 400 to 1000 ISO. I also like getting my image as close as possible to the look that I want in camera so that I don't have to do that much in post. But experiment and see what works for you. The 6K or the 12K might be slightly different, so make sure you do proper tests. Here goes some BTS of light placement for this small setup. For starters, I added in a practical lamp for some motivation with a Govee light bulb. This is probably the most common and easy way to get started with setting up your scene. For others, they start with a key light or room tone. In my opinion, it's completely preference. Another practical was also placed here to the right to add a pop of interest to the shot. That was the aperture-like LED panel. For my key in the close-up, I brought a Quasar tube wrapped in unbleached muslin. It not only throws a good soft light, but it's also a really good quality of light with a high CRI rating, perfect for lighting skin. I edit and grade in Final Cut Pro X. It would be DaVinci, but my laptop can't handle the V-RAW from this camera, so I typically use ProRes HQ for my projects and LT for these tests. But in this particular case, I use ProRes HQ. When I start to grade, I instantly apply my Juan Malera Pocket 4K2Alexa LUT. Call me lazy, but I'm not a colorist, and this LUT is amazing for what I use it for. I get a lot of people saying my grades look the best when I only apply the LUT, which I don't disagree with, but I prefer a dark image personally. So the next thing I do is add my curves and wheels, and make sure you leave your adjustments over one another. Leaving them on the bottom does some weird things to the grade, and you don't want that. So I like to start with a slight curve to add back in some contrast. Not too much on the bottom, as we can adjust shadows in the wheels, so we can be careful not to crush them too much. Then in wheels, I lower my highlights, and I don't know why, but I find that what I like is when my highlights are just slightly below or above 75 IRE on the waveforms. I can't tell you why. It's just what my eye likes most of the time. But again, experiment and see what works for you. After that, you can play around with another set of wheels or lines and adjust the colors as needed for whatever your film's about. I won't go too in depth about color grading because my knowledge is limited only to what I prefer, but I will link some videos that did a great job of explaining the process more in depth than I ever could. I also add some sharpening, but only the default amount in Final Cut Pro X, as it can start to look video-y really quick. And that's pretty much it. I want to thank this subscriber for asking for this video. I've been stuck as to what to talk about on this channel, as there are so many other great teaching creatives already, and I don't want to spout the same old thing, boring people to death. But what I'm realizing is that my process isn't the same as anyone else's, and that in itself is different enough. Again, thank you, and I hope to see you back here again.